Stephen Mansfield, New York Times bestselling author and speaker.
Doug Tenaple, I'm the creator of Earthworm Jim.
Tweet Groups.
I'm Victor Dweck.
Joseph Carter, I'm the Mink Man.
This is Dave Baker from Forged in Fire.
This is Leah Morgan. I'm a comedian, and this is why you should never
Not
ever.
Don't waste your time.
Oh, you really should.
listen to those darling, yummy Reverend and the Reprobate.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Reverend and the Reprobate. I am Lucas Pinkert. I'm the Reverend for today's episode.
And I am the hot one, Dan Gibson.
Welcome to another episode. I am here, as always, with Danley Gibson. Today we get to interview one of our heroes.
Unbelievable. We get to interview Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Is what we get to do.
Mike Rhyner, the old gray wolf, is on the show today. He talks to us about his time at the Little Ticket, which has become one of the most influential radio stations as far as terrestrial radio goes in the United States. Mm-hmm. Loads of people have tried to take it, copy it, try to make it work in other markets, and it's one of the things that caused us to want to do a podcast.
And we directly ripped off one of them.
We did. We completely ripped off one of their bits, and then Mike did it for us. Yeah, which was great.
We're talking about the sign off with the guests. Yeah. You know, we changed it a little bit, but it's at least heavily inspired by the Ticket.
We talked to him about the Ticket. We talked to him about his new podcast, Your Dark Companion, about music. We've got a really cool controlled rowdiness segment with some very thoughtful answers. Mm-hmm. I am going to just give away what the entire interview was if we don't go ahead and cut to it. So here,
Mike Rhyner. Let's give the people what they want.
Yeah, like,
Mike
subscribe, ding the little bell so that you get notifications. Here he is, the man, the myth, the actual legend, DFW Radio Hall of Famer.
This is now about Mike
Rhyner.
Boys can count and go.
Let's go.
Well, on our airwaves today, Expo is one of the men that was the voice of our youth, our adolescence, and into our adulthood. It is the guy that got me interested in wanting to do interviews and broadcasting in the first place.
Spanning several seasons of both of our lives.
Yes. Danley,
up until he randomly just left. He just didn't like us anymore.
He literally walked down the longest hallway of all time. It is Your Dark Companion and the Texas Radio Hall of Famer, Mike Rhyner. How are you doing, Mike?
Rhyner.
I'm doing great. Thank you, boys, for having me.
Well, thank you for being on our show. We want to steal one of your phrases. We want to flit a little bit about your career and talk about a radio career that spanned an incredibly long time, not just with the things that you did at the Ticket, but even prior to that, you've been involved in music, which I hear is what got you into radio. Talk to us a little bit about the career of Mike Rhyner in Dallas, especially as it relates to the Zoo and the Ticket, and how that has shaped not just Dallas radio, but who you are and where you're at.
Well, I don't know if it's for me to say how it's shaped Dallas radio. That's probably best left to others. But if somebody thinks that something I did might have played some small part in shaping Dallas radio, then that's really, really cool. Now, as to what it was like for me being in my shoes and going through it all, it was like the most magnificent LSD trip you could possibly imagine. It was just unbelievable. It was too much to behold. And really, now it seems like it happened to somebody else, not me.
Well, it was a long time too that you were in radio. The Ticket started, what was it, 30 something years ago?
Actually, the Ticket was I got through 26. It started in 94. So do a little math there. Prior to that, I spent a year at WBAP, a very brief stint, which nobody even remembers, at KZPS, and then 7 years at the Zoo. That's where I broke in. So I was in the game for about 33, 34 years, something like that. There have been guys who were there longer, but guarantee you, nobody ever had more fun.
So what was your favorite moment? I mean, we both talked about ahead of time. We don't want to get too in the weeds with just sticking on the Ticket stuff, but we would be remiss not to talk about some of that because it's some of our favorite radio experiences. He got me in. He was a P1 from birth almost. Your dad was into it. But there have been so many great moments. What was your favorite, whether it was guest or segment or Was there anything that stands out as just your top favorite?
Gosh, there were so many that could be in that conversation. But I always like to go back to the early days when I think about that sort of thing. Because in the early days, there was all kinds of doubt through the business, probably all kinds of the building, as to whether or not we could do this at all, as to whether or not this would be successful, as to whether or not an all sports radio station could make it in the Dallas market. And one of the things I remember is probably about, 6 months or so in, maybe a little longer than that. Seems like it was in the fall of this year. But it was the first year of the radio station. And we were going to have one of our first big listener events. And it was going to be at one of those Lone Star Country Club type places out there on Walnut Hill, a little bit west of Stemmons. Mm-hmm. They used to have a really big venue out there where people would go play volleyball and stuff like that and everything. And we were going to do it there. And I was a little bit late because, I had a young kid at the time and her mom worked and everything, or my wife, I should say, worked. And sometimes we would have to take turns ferrying the young daughter around and getting her from place to place. So we would be free to do whatever we needed to do and whatever we had to do. And this was one of those days. I got there a little bit late because I was doing that. And I pulled up to the place and the parking lot was full. And I thought, okay, this can't be for us. There's no way that all these people are here to see us. Surely this must be some bigger, larger event, and they're going to have us tucked away into a little side room. And really, I was thinking if there were 40 or 50 people there, I would be overjoyed. But I walked in, and sure enough, that place was full of people who were there to see us. And that was one of the first times that I had to stop down and just take a couple of seconds by myself and say, man, this is really going to happen. Are you ready for it? But it was really cool. That was one of the first big ones.
I remember, so my dad used to listen to, my parents worked opposite shifts. My mom worked in the evenings, my dad worked in the mornings. And so whenever we would get done with school, my mom would drop us off at the AT&T parking lot, or the GTE at the time, parking lot. My dad would get off work and grab us, and then we'd go home, and we were forced to listen to Randy Galloway every day. And I remember as, a 6 and 7 year old kid that I could not stand it. Uh-huh. And the very first day of the ticket, when we were listening to Mike and Greg, it was the best. Like, for me, that was just this magnificent thing happened because Randy Galloway wasn't on the radio anymore, and it was these new voices and these guys that were funny, and they were talking about things that my mom would totally not approve of. My dad would have to, like, every 30 minutes, he'd have to change the station. One of the very first things that I did whenever I could drive was to go to a guy's night out. Made it to a guy's night out. I made it to my first ticket stock whenever I was a teenager because these were, you guys were the people who narrated life to me in DFW, not just sports, but everything that you talked about. We grew up in a band, or we grew up together playing in a band. The places that you talked about whenever you guys were out gigging when you were growing up, we wanted to play at those same venues. And part of the reason is because Mike was there, that Mike had played there, and we were, as many as the other great bands, you were kind of a hero to a lot of us in the music scene, but also definitely when it came to sports talk and to radio. Was sports talk in particular, I know you mentioned that it was such a challenge to get started. It was something that people weren't doing in the DFW area. Sports talk in particular, why did people think that it wouldn't last or that it wouldn't have a life in Dallas?
That's a great question. And I've never been able to come up with any kind of finger that I could put on the reasoning why they thought that way. But I will tell you this story. Prior to the start of the ticket, I would go on vacation with the family, and we would go visit my wife's brother who lived up in Boston. We would go to Chicago. We would go to Seattle, a couple of other places. And those places, they had sports radio. I mean, it was there. It was happening. It was on. It was, 24 hours a day, not just 6 o'clock at night like it was here. And, Norm was around, so it was 6 o'clock in the morning, too, on Cliff.
Right.
And all I wanted to do, the girls wanted to go see stuff and do stuff with the kid and everything like that. And I was down with that. But really, all I wanted to do was sit there and listen to the sports radio and listen to how they did it. Listen to the pace of the thing, the way the guys who were on the team shows worked with each other. I was soaking up as much of that as I could. And when I got back, I started going up to people that I knew in the business, including some that would wind up on the ticket. And I would say to them, so have you ever listened to sports radio, all sports radio in other towns? They go, oh, yeah, I've heard it. And I'd say, do you think it would work here? And they just went, no way. I said, well, why? And they said, because to do it here, you'd need three things. Number one, you would need name talent, and all the big name talent here is under contract. They can't be taken away. And even if you could get them, it would be absurdly expensive to do so. Number two, you were going to need a team to carry their games. You're going to need the Rangers, the Cowboys, the Mavericks, the Stars, whatever. And you can't get them because they too are all under contract, and that too would be prohibitively expensive. Number three, you're going to need a big signal, and those are all taken too, and those are all prohibitively expensive. And I would hear them say that, and I'm not see where they're coming from, but nowhere in there did I ever hear any reason why it wouldn't work if you got guys who could connect with the listener. And that, any answer for that never did really come to me, so that kind of gave me the stump for the fight to forge on with this thing. And I started pitching the idea just in real vague general terms, not like, I'm going to do this or anything like that, to some of the others, until one day when the things I was working on behind the scenes and away from them got put into place enough to where I was told by the guys that I had this already working with to, okay, go out there and get some guys. And I called them aside and pitched it to them, told them what was up. That I think I got a couple guys who want to play sports radio, and I want you in on this.
So to paraphrase, it wasn't a lack of market or interest. It was just there was a whole bunch of other challenges. How are we going to broadcast? How are we going to get talent on? But the market and DFW was definitely ready for sports radio, which
as things turned out, but nobody thought that at the time. Hell, I don't even know if I thought that at the time either. All I knew was I saw what I thought was a void here, and sooner or later, somebody was going to fill that void, and I wanted to be the guy to do it.
I think
there is a joke there that I won't do. But,
Go ahead.
I think one of the things that made the ticket so special, especially during the time when it came in, was that it wasn't so many of the sports talk shows. Like if you looked at Norm, for instance, Norm is, what's in the opening line? He's got stats to the max, statisticians can't handle, and all of that stuff.
He loves the Diamond Doctor.
Yeah, so there's all, and he wants you to choose your energy, but there's all of these things that Norm knew inside and out. Norm was a sports expert, right? The other people were set up that way. When the ticket came on, it was like talking sports with your buddies and with your friends. And not just that, it seemed like everybody was having such a great time. Now, as the leader of that group, what did you do to build the camaraderie with the other hosts on the station, because I think that is one of the things that's head and shoulders set the station above everybody else is even though now there's 3 stations, everybody on the ticket really seems to enjoy each other and have a lot of fun.
That was real important. It was real important to get the right guys for this. And believe me, I rummaged through some guys and I turned away some guys. And the reason I did was because I didn't think that they were the right guys for what we wanted. And I was just really, really lucky that at that particular time in my life and in my scene, I happened to be around some guys that I thought could do this. And it just so happened that they, like me, were, low-level minions in the game at that time. And they were willing to take the chance. I mean, if any of those factors had not been in place, then the whole narrative changes. The whole narrative is completely different. Mm-hmm. And chances are I'm not a part of it. If I'm not a part of it, there's a pretty good chance that none of those other guys are either.
So speaking of talent at the show, I have a question for you because I didn't know the answer to this, and I assumed that someone else did, and it turns out that he also doesn't know. We had Shoopy on, so we made friends with Shoopy, and through the conversation, I had this question. I went, I don't want to look like an idiot, so I didn't ask. How did he get the name Shoopy?
That's a really, really good question, and I don't know if I have a real good answer.
Okay.
he probably would. He probably.
I should have asked him.
He probably would remember it better than me. But we were making fun of somebody, and I can't remember who. But I just started calling him Shoopy, and he started calling me Shoopy back.
I'm happy with that answer.
Yeah, that's great.
I wish I had more for you, but he probably would, or if he wouldn't, I'll bet I know who would.
I'll ask him. Who would?
Expo.
Really?
Okay.
Oh yeah, Expo remembers everything.
That's this guy.
Expo is amazing.
I'm curious. We were just, for those who don't know, Shoopy is.
Yeah, I should have given more context.
Yeah, is Michael Gruber, also known as Tweet Groobs, who's now working for the Rangers.
Tweet Groobs, aka Shoopy.
Yeah, who's living his dream job. Well, you guys created something pretty amazing with the way that you used drops. That was a really innovative thing. It was unique to the station, especially as it happened throughout the day, not like just on a wacky morning show or something of that nature. If I remember right, it started with Psycho Dave was the first person that I really remember that was on the drops consistently. How did that come about? And then how is that something that you guys have passed down? Because Groobs picked it up. Mino is now just the biggest troll of all time with the way that he uses that stuff. How was that something that you cultivated? How did that get started?
Well, actually, the guy who started it was Expo.
Okay.
I used to call him the Doctor of Drops. He was the first guy that we had running the board who came in there and took the job seriously. And I don't know if you know him or know anything about him, but he's a real smart guy. He's also real no nonsense,
Which is a funny role.
He's a really tough guy for the average spare guy to get to know. But he saw that the way for him to make his place on the show and get a little notoriety was by playing drops, by getting good at playing drops and playing drops in a real timely, well-placed, appropriate or inappropriate moment.
Especially inappropriate.
Oh, no doubt.
Yeah. He was the first one to really get good at it. But the amazing thing is that everybody who came in after him got good at it too. I mean, we probably had, 6, 7, 8 guys in that job over the years, and every single one of them adapted to it. It's not the kind of job that you can stay in for a long time, because it's just the sameness quality of it is absolutely mind-numbing, and you reach burnout real fast. That's what happened to Expo. That's what happened to everybody who's done it. They just got burnt out with it after a while, and it lost its zeal for them, and eventually they moved on. But Expo was the guy who started it all. And he deserves all kind of credit for that, but so do the others because they all picked it up.
Mm-hmm. It's the first time I remember the board op having a personality on the show.
It's a character in the show, the drop. It adds a lot. You're expecting it. Not only does the drop itself add a lot, but I remember Gordon. I mean, they still do it. Doing fake voices to avoid having a drop made.
Right.
So there's all kinds of these folds that come from having the drops as a character on the show, which made it incredibly entertaining.
It did, but it also came with some consequences, and the invoking of what was known at the time as the P1 Hornet's Nest. Do you remember the incident with Alex Gordon at spring training?
Oh yeah.
What was that like when that drop? For everybody who doesn't know, there was an unfortunate drop that got played while one of the guys was talking to Alex Gordon's wife.
I would say brilliantly.
Yes, brilliantly by tweet groups, which caused the hardline to be banished from spring training for a few seasons.
Yeah, because that got back around to Alex Gordon that happened. And Alex Gordon, for those who don't know, was a player for many years for the Kansas City Royals. And the Royals and Rangers shared spring training facilities together. So when the Rangers weren't using it, the Royals were. Sometimes, though, they would play each other in spring training games, and that's when this happened. And usually, after a guy was out of the game, or I don't know, sometimes during the game, I can't remember exactly when this happened, but Corby would take the wireless microphone down through the stands and talk to people. And one time he was talking to Alex Gordon's girlfriend or fiance, wife, whatever it might have been. And that's when this unfortunate drop, whatever it was, I can't remember that either, but that's when that was played.
Oh, I remember.
I remember
exactly
too.
what it was.
We can't say it.
It was the stupid B drop is the one that got played.
Yeah. Okay, well that got back around to her. See that back then? I don't know if we fully comprehended the big nature of the world that we were in.
Mm-hmm.
We thought we were. You're up there doing this show for us. A lot of the time it was just talking to each other, We weren't thinking that there were actually people out there listening to it, let alone people from foreign ports that might be listening to it, or people who might know somebody in foreign ports, however that came about. But we found out that, yes, that was indeed the case. And that was one of the first things that kind of emphasized to us what a big world we're in.
Mm-hmm.
So Corby is the one that, if I remember the story correctly, got called up in front of Rangers management. What conversations did they end up having with you, if any, or was Corby just
listen?
Just
we got to
scapegoat?
fire Grooves. He's gone.
Yeah.
No. Did that happen at all? What was the conversation?
Well, I was admonished for this, and I was always the one who would go in there and fall on the sword.
Good
Corby
leader.
wouldn't do that. I would.
It's a good leader.
Right. I would go in there and tell them, "Hey guys, look, I know this is wrong. I'm really sorry about this. And I will handle it with him. I will make sure nothing like this ever happens again." And then, of course, I didn't say another single word to him.
I'm gonna go take Grooves out for a couple of beers and give him a roll of quarters for arcades.
Yeah,
teach him a lesson.
And that's kind of the way that would always come down. There were other incidents with the Rangers. The Rangers were really kind of uptight a little bit at that time. They might still be, for all I know, but as much talk as we gave the Rangers, they weren't willing to push the envelope with us very far. Because we'd talk about them. Nobody else on the station would.
The Rangers are the one team that I don't remember any direct affiliation with. right? Like, even though the Mavericks were never on the station, Cuban would come up to the station often to talk to the guys because they're right there in Victory Plaza, especially after the move to the new studios. But you guys have had the Stars and the Cowboys. What were those relationships like with the team? Because I remember when the Cowboys were on, you said that, you're not in any owner's back pocket. You were, there we go. So is there a gag order in place that you guys were or weren't allowed to say some things? Or is that still something that's in place? Or were you allowed just kind of the freedom that you wanted?
I don't think it's in place, but I'm not there anymore, so I really wouldn't know.
Sure.
But I don't think it's in place. I don't think a gag order per se with the Rangers ever came down. But we kind of saw that this is not an organization that has a real great sense of humor to it. Mm-hmm. So let's tread lightly here.
Yeah.
Did that change at all with the new ownership?
No.
Okay.
Wow.
So just consistently protective over their brand.
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty good when Wash was here in those years.
Yeah.
They were going to the World Series and everything. We had a good relationship with them then. And we were, up in St. Louis. I watched Game 6 in person. And, I mean, we got some access, but they wouldn't give us full access because they were on other stations.
Yeah.
That's kind of the way it worked. If you have sold your broadcast rights to another station, then that station gets first run at everything you do. And everybody else gets the leftovers. That's the way it was with them.
Well, I think the last question I probably got about the radio background is, as the world moves towards digital, where do you see the direction of, I'll go with the ticket. Where do you see the ticket growing to keep up with the direction everything's going with digital broadcasting?
I don't know. It's something they're all going to have to wrestle with and something they're all going to have to come to terms with. Like I said a minute ago, I'm not there anymore. I'm not in on the conversations. But, you got some bright people up there. You got some bright people up there who know the way. And I'm sure the ticket will be in good hands, provided, of course, that they are given the resources to do whatever they need to do.
That's
what I wonder about more than anything else, because, I mean, these are really, really difficult, stringent times in that business up there.
Yeah.
And I fear that before anything like that happens and there's any kind of mass movement to the digital side of things, there are going to be some big, big changes in the terrestrial side.
Yeah.
And the shape of some of these stations, maybe in the ticket, maybe not, but some of these stations is not going to be the same.
I want to switch gears. We've talked a lot about the ticket thus far.
By the way, we both have 10,000 more questions,
right?
But to stay on track and keep the things moving,
yeah. So you retired from the ticket in December of 2019. We all found out about it in January of 2020.
Yeah. Did you know?
Did I know what
about
when?
the pandemic?
Yeah, is that why you stepped out?
You heard some whispers.
That was a masterful stroke of timing on my part.
Okay, I was going to say, so the beginning of what made 2020 a difficult year for me was hearing the Rhyner retirement announcement when everybody got back from the holiday dry dock. But what I want to highlight is, as we're talking about moving to digital, you've got a new podcast called Your Dark Companion. What was the impetus behind you starting this show, and what are you doing with the show, if you can tell our listeners a little about that?
Well, yes, I'd be delighted to tell you about that. Thank you for asking, Lucas. It's on Vokal. Vokalnow.com is where you go if you'd like to sample it. And the way it came about is within a matter, when I stepped away, I didn't know what I was going to do. I had no plans, I knew the podcast scene was out there, but I didn't know if I'd want to get into it or not. You know, it was just a real big mass of gray matter, the future was, you know, and people would say, what are you going to do now? And I'd say, I don't know, maybe something, maybe nothing. We'll see. And that was not a way of not answering the question. It's really the way I felt at the time. That was really what I was thinking. But a few days after that, the guys over at The Athletic rattled my cage and said, we'd like to talk to you about doing something in our podcast space. And so I said, okay, I'll talk to them about that. And we got together and I said, okay, well, what do you want me to do here? And they said, we want you to just be you. We want what's on Mike's mind. That's what we want. We want you to do whatever you want to do. If you want to interview people, do that. If you want to get on there and just pontificate, do that. Just do you. That's what we want. And I thought, okay, I like that. And I did it over there for a while, but then Vokal hired me away, and now I'm doing it there. And it's taken on kind of an interview type situation. The big podcast, Your Dark Companion has, but I also there's also a What's on Mike's Mind element where I essentially do there anything else that I might have rattling around up here. So
do you have the same theme song for What's on Mike's Mind? I've almost started singing it after the second time.
Which one? The Mexican one or the
there was the Jack in the Box one.
Yeah,
I'm sorry for interrupting. I decided to.
No, I'd really like to use those for it, but I don't think that I would be allowed to.
Yeah.
So we've listened to several of the episodes. You just recently did an episode with Bob Sturm. You've interviewed Troy Aikman, Brad Sham, Wolonsky, so many of these guys. How do you select your guests, and what makes the Your Dark Companion show unique? What makes it special to you?
Oh, the thing that makes it special to me is I can talk to people that I've always wanted to talk to, but I don't have to limit the conversation to their chosen field. I can get them to branch out and talk a little bit more about them, and a little bit more about how they got to where they are, talk a little bit about their path. And we can dig, I mean, if you've heard those 3 interviews that you mentioned, you probably found out something about all of those guys that you did not know. I know I certainly did. And, you can, I don't know, it just gives me a little bit more latitude that I would get on a normal radio program to, work the edges a little bit, find out a little bit more about what makes these guys tick, find out a little bit more about how they do what they do, find out how they got to where they are. Find out what their own experiences in their fields over the years has been like. And I think it's pretty fascinating to find that stuff out.
What is it that you think about you in particular that allows you to draw some of that depth out of people? For instance, with the Troy Aikman interview, he started talking not just about his career, but in the very beginning, talking about the move from having Tom Landry come and watch his games, and then now Jimmy Johnson's taking over, and they're still talking about him being the draft pick. And you have an incredible way of connecting with people that draws the sort of emotional side out of them where they want to tell a story in a fascinating way. What is it that you do that brings that out in the people that you interview?
Well, in that case, one thing about Troy that I've always found really interesting is he was the guy who got the Cowboys through the biggest transition period they have ever had. Like when they were being sold and he was coming on board, there was a pretty good chance for a while there that he was going to wind up playing for Tom Landry. That's what he thought. But there were things going on behind the scenes at the time that none of us knew, and that never came about. Instead, Jerry Jones came in, he brought in Jimmy, and you know the rest of that story. Mm-hmm. And it was always a really fascinating point, or I thought it would be a fascinating point with him, to find out what that was like for him. where he goes through all this process knowing that he's going to be drafted by the Cowboys, and he's thinking he's going to be playing for Tom Landry, but then all of a sudden something intervenes and he finds that he's not. Instead, he winds up playing for a guy that he had a certain amount of history with.
And that's he tells that whole story, and we'll link that episode in the show notes because it's fascinating. Not just where he talks about Jimmy trying to recruit him whenever he was leaving OU, but all the things that happened post that and his career path. What is it that you think as you've gone through all this? Because these aren't the people that you've interviewed. You've interviewed a lot of local people that have Dallas ties. But over the course of your career, you've had the opportunity to interview hundreds of folks all over the place. If you were to whittle it down to maybe your top 2 or 3 interviews that you've done all time, what is it about those? Who are those interviews first, and then what is it about those interviews that made them so special to you or so memorable?
Well, for an interview to be memorable to me, the guy on the other end's got to give me something. There have been a lot of really big names who would come through the studio, and we'd visit with them for a while, but we really wouldn't get that much out of them. They were doing an interview tour, and they were going to leave us, go to ESPN or somewhere else and do it there. They were just being whisked about. And even though the name might be big, the name might be attractive, the interview was not that great. The interview was very condensed. There was a flack in there, making sure we didn't wander off track or anything like that. And they had to be out of there at a certain time. But with these, there's none of that. And I make it clear to guys when they come on that, this is going to be kind of free form here. This is going to be kind of free form. There's no time limit. It's going to be a conversation, not just a connect the dots interview. Mm-hmm. And in that way, I had Hansen on not too long ago, thinking that we might go for tops an hour, and we went almost 2.
Oh, wow.
Hansen and I go way back, and it doesn't take much for me to get him going, telling old stories and stuff like that. And he's got a million of them. He is without a doubt the alpha male in media that's ever been around here.
Really?
And, there's no question about it.
Does that make him toxic?
No, that doesn't make it. Through it all, he has managed to keep from being toxic. Oddly enough.
Good for him.
But every time I talk to him, I learn something I didn't know. It goes down a path that I didn't think it would, and it's always memorable. It's always memorable, and my interview with him was one of the best. Let's see. As far as others go, God, there have been so many. So many over the years.
Yeah, I was thinking, you said hundreds. I was like, could it be more than that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, with 30 plus years in radio, plus all the stuff he did for The Athletic, and then the podcasting, it's your interviews in particular are some of the ones that I have studied as we are preparing to do interviewing, because not just the presence and the technique, but also the vocabulary. One of the things that has been my biggest takeaway from listening to you over the years has been my wordsmithing.
Biosphere.
Things like heed to, trice up, mill about smartly that you said every day became part of my normal conversation that people had no idea what I was talking about. Where did the impetus on the, as I'm using it, I'm trying to use just as many big words as possible. Where did that focus on vocabulary come from, and how has, or was that a focus of yours in order to create that part of your persona?
I've always been a word nut ever since I was a kid. I was a word nut. English teachers loved me. Math teachers hated me. And the reason they did was because I hated math, but I loved words. And I loved writing, and I loved constructing sentences. And I loved reading books where, good sentences were constructed and words were strung together in an artful way. I still do love all that. And a lot of the time when I read a sentence that I like, I'll go back and read it again several times and just think about the way it's constructed, the words that are used, and try to steal them, if you will.
Yeah.
I'm a thief, man. I'm a thief of the highest order. I have almost no original thought. Everything you hear from me was stolen from somewhere else.
Just sponged into Mike.
Yeah.
Yes, that's right. That's
Squeezed and then allowed to absorb.
But it's worked.
Yeah.
And
But
that's one of the things. It's my favorite is to come up with, at least one word every interview that I can spin out there and attempt it. But for this one, I was just like, there's no way. Where I'm not going to trip Mike up with any words. He is the master wordsmith.
But by the way, you wrote that the intro to the Hardline?
Well, I just kind of ad-libbed it.
No way.
Yeah, I just kind of ad-libbed it one day, and it sort of evolved in certain ways over the years. But I'll tell you where I got all that stuff.
Dictionary.
I used to have a cousin that was in the Navy. And he used to keep all of his Navy gear in his sea bag, I guess they call them, at the house. And there, every time I would go see him when I was a kid, would be the manual. And I would start reading the manual, and I read once this thing that they would say when reveille happened every day. And it was time to heave to, trice up. The smoking lamp is lit throughout the ship. Mill about smartly throughout the premises. And a couple of others. And somehow that lodged up here over the years.
That makes so much sense.
Oh, it does now.
Yeah.
My wife hates all of that because when I get her up in the morning, I'll tell her, "Hey, Kirsten, it's time to heave to, trice up, mill about smartly around the premises," and she's like, "Stop it."
Yeah.
I'm like making sure every radio, and she's like, "We're not," and she will kick me out of our room. As soon as I start that. That's how we start every day.
I understand. I would too.
It's all the more reason to keep doing it.
Yeah, and that's exactly. It gets her out of bed, so that's working.
Oh, purpose served then.
And you have the endorsement from the old gray wolf himself.
Yeah, from the man himself to continue
Proceed.
doing it. Now I have to.
Sure.
So I want to. We've talked about the radio stuff, and all your interviewing. Obviously, you're incredibly skilled there. Let's talk music, because I know that is one of your other great passions outside of radio and sports. How did you end up in your playing music? What started your passion with music? And let's talk a little bit about petty theft and some of the things that you're doing now with that.
Well, the thing that got me into it was the British invasion when the Beatles came out. I thought it would be a thing that could make me cool. I was decidedly uncool. Yeah. And I had to do something about that. I needed a few bullet points because I was not good looking. I was woefully skinny. I wore glasses. I had zits. I was I had bad hair.
Hey, there's nothing wrong with glasses.
Oh, I know. But back then they made you a nerd.
Yeah.
Now
they still do.
Now you put on glasses and you kind of make them work for you a little bit.
Yeah, you look so studious.
Yes,
studious.
Yes,
thank you.
Good word.
That's right. But back then it was a sign that you were a full-fledged nerd.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to try and come up with something that would make me cool, and I had a little rhythm and I could kind of feel the drums a little bit. So I started playing drums in bands, and I had a couple of high school bands that, would play every now and then and stuff. But I wanted more. I wanted to do more with it. It kind of got under my skin. I wanted to do more, and so I started trying to get better and everything. Before long, I was able to get into a band that started to do some things and started to get gigs and stuff like that. And the trouble was, I was almost out of high school, and I had Nom hanging over my head.
Mm-hmm.
But fortunately, there was a place where guys like me could go to avoid that, provided we kept our grades up. That place was El Centro Junior College, which is mere blocks away from where I am right now. And I walk by there every day and kiss its turf.
No doubt.
Because it served the purpose. But anyway, I kept going in bands and, started playing with bands that played more and more. And before long, it was kind of my gig. So that's how it started. And I kept doing it until about, I think the last band I was in ended probably in 84 or so. And by then I was working at the zoo and everything. So I quit doing that, went all radio all the time. And I thought, okay, bands are over for me. Never going to do it again. It's done. It's a part of my sordid past. Let's move on. And I thought that's the way it would be until one year at Summer Bash, I did a couple Tom Petty songs with the band out there.
Mm-hmm.
And this was a time when cover bands were starting to take on the form that they have taken today, i.e. bands that did the material of one artist.
Right.
You had a Hard Night's Day around, The Dead Thing, which I never saw, but I understand now what they did. They were a Grateful Dead cover band.
Yeah.
They were around, and there might have been one or two others. And on the way home from Summer Bash, I started thinking, man, it'd be kind of neat if there were a Tom Petty cover band. That'd be kind of neat to go see. And long story short, by the time I got home, that throwaway idea had gone from just that, a throwaway idea, to, okay, who do I know? How can I make this happen? And I got down on it, and before long, we had us a band. And that band has lasted, oddly enough.
It has, and is phenomenal. I will say it's been one of the most sought after cover band tickets that is around, or tribute bands, however you want to put it. I've always been curious as to why Tom Petty, though. Not that he's not great. The Heartbreakers and Tom Petty had tons and tons of hits. They've got magnificent music. Why did Tom Petty stick out to you above all those other guys? And if you would have played somebody else's music at Summer Bash, might you be in a Beatles cover band instead?
Possible. Anything's possible.
Or Metallica. Have you ever played metal?
No, I've never played metal.
Okay.
I've never played metal, but I'll tell you what, I've come around on Metallica.
Oh, yeah?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they're good.
I used to not care for them too much, but now I do.
Again.
There's definitely something most serious in play there.
Yeah.
James Hetfield is one of the best frontmen in the world, I think.
Definitely in the last 30
and I'm
years
not
of rock
married
and
to
roll.
Metallica. That was a
Right.
throwaway example, but I do also love Metallica.
Yeah. So why Tom Petty?
There was just something about his music always that it seemed like I'd heard it before. It seemed there was just some tone of familiarity that always hit me about it. I would listen to it and I think, yeah, I know this. I mean, I can relate to this. This is guitars, bass, drums, keyboards, and vocals. I can relate to this. There's nothing outside of that really in play here. And come to find out, as I learned a little bit more about him, we were about the same age. I'm, I believe, 65 days his senior. And when I was playing in bands here, he was over in Florida doing the same thing. And from what I know of his experiences and from what I know of mine, it sounds like we had quite a few that were very similar. You know, the difference was he saw a much bigger world than I did.
I've always enjoyed those artists that you grow up with because they seem to kind of speak like right to your heart. One of the big moments that I remember on the radio was the day that Tom Petty passed away. And that was something that that you guys covered. What was that like? Because you were playing in Petty Theft while he was still around and doing things. How did that affect the way, or did it affect the way that you guys approach the material since his passing?
I don't know that it affected the way we approach it. I mean, we're still doing basically the same thing that we have always done. I mean, people still want to hear his music, and the onus is on us to deliver it to them. And that's what we try and do. As far as the way it affected me goes, I can't say that I was totally shocked by it, because I'd heard he'd been having some real problems on his last tour.
Yeah.
That he had a broken hip, and that to get him ready to go, they pretty much had to lift him onto the stage.
Oh, mercy.
Yeah. But the crazy thing was, once he was up there, all that went away. I mean, if you didn't know there was anything wrong with him, you probably wouldn't know. And I haven't talked to too many people who saw him on that last tour that came away saying, man, something's going on that's not good here. So it was kind of business as usual for him, remarkably enough.
It seems like some of those artists, I immediately think of Ozzy being one, that it seems like they save all of their energy for the stage. You know, like I've seen videos of Ozzy Osbourne, almost walking with a crutch or some kind of, limping to get on stage. As soon as he is on stage, he's running around, jumping like a madman. I don't know if that's one of those two, or an actor, if he's just saving himself for his performance. I wonder if Tom Petty was like that too.
I think he was. In fact, I've heard that he was from people that I've come to know over the years who were part of the crew. They said that they had to work like hell to get him ready to go. But once they did, it was like nothing was wrong.
That's a true showman, right?
Yeah. I don't understand how they do that, because if he was in as bad a shape as I've heard he was, and what people have said he was, then man, he was in really, really bad shape.
Well, shout out to Tom Petty's and the Apartments in the Sky.
Yeah. And what was it, the trifectas that they used to do?
I don't know who he's saying.
Yeah, which apartment
I hope
he was
they're
in.
nice.
Yeah. So
I hope they are too.
Are you still doing the Nerds?
No, we haven't done the Nerds for some time, and that's too bad, because I was really fond of that band. The Nerds was a Byrds cover band that we did for a while. The Byrds, for those who may not know, were a very popular folk rock group from the 60s that were very influential to Tom Petty, pretty much more than anybody else. But we were doing their stuff for a while, and that was a lot of fun to do, but it kind of came and went.
Yeah, they were incredible lyricists. So the only Byrds song I was familiar with was the Turn, Turn, Turn song. And once you guys started doing the Nerds, I dove a little deeper into their portfolio. And these guys wrote just some absolutely beautiful and amazing tunes. Why is it that you think a band, for instance, like the Byrds, that they're not as well recognized as some of the other groups in that time? Because they were, as far as I was concerned, and I thought myself to be fairly apt in older music, why do you think they kind of get buried?
Well, in music circles, they don't get buried. In music circles, they get their due from everybody. And their influence was felt not only by Tom and the Heartbreakers, but many, many, many others over the years. I don't know. It's real hard to say, because they had hits at the time, and those hits are still heard on oldies radio today. So it's not like they've drifted away into utter complete nothingness. It's really hard to say, because you go through the rest of their catalog, and there are some great, great deeper cuts on there that were never heard back then and didn't make top 40 radio back then, and really are never heard today. It's just too bad that has to happen and more people aren't into it, but I guess it was just too nichey for mass consumption.
Well, I want to briefly get into, because I know we're running low on some time. I want to make sure that we're taking your time into account. But there's a special interest that you two share that you turned me on to, and I am curious, probably at a high level, what first caught your attention with the Albrecht and Silk Road situation?
Man. It was the story. Well, I know you must have read this, Lucas. The story in Wired.
Yep.
Wired.com. That was the first thing I read that got me into it. And there were so many tentacles to that story. And I would talk about it on the air some, and neither of the other guys on the show were the least bit interested in it.
They were not.
I can see that.
I couldn't have been more disappointed by that. But there was one guy up there who was interested in it.
Is Gordon?
And that was Jake.
Jake, oh, okay.
So if I were going to get my Ross Ulbricht rocks off, I was going to have to do it with him. Mm-hmm. And we did, but it was mainly that Wired story that did it for me. And there was just so much about that story. The fact that the guy got away with this for so long, the fact that it was really nothing more than the free market in action. Now it was illegal as hell, but still the free market's the free market. It was working the way the free market's supposed to work. Mm-hmm. And it was just really, really interesting to me that this guy had found a way to make the free market work like it was supposed to. But to do it by delivering anything you would want, legal or not.
Do you want to summarize that from a high level?
Yes. Long story short, Ross Ulbricht, a.k.a. the Dread Pirate Roberts, created a free market on the dark web known as the Silk Road. And when the government finally shut it down, they charged him in his mid-20s with a crime that is not technically on the books. And his sentence was two life sentences plus 40 years for something that the NSA has charged him with that is unable to be appealed because it does not appear anywhere in the books, but some kind of trumped up web security thing wherein he created and facilitated a way for people to move, as Mike said, absolutely anything they wanted to, from Pokemon cards to narcotics to sex trafficking and everything in between. And it was all based on the non-aggression principle. As long as it didn't harm anyone in order to do it, then it was supposed to be allowed to happen. And this was a story you followed for at least a couple of years, I think, as the trial was happening.
Yeah, I mean, anything that I could find out there on it, I read. And I didn't do that much on the air with it because, like I say, nobody else was into it. Mm-hmm. But as far as being into the story myself, oh yeah, I was into that story like I said.
Well, I am too now. Ever since he told me about it, I went to do some research, and it's very fascinating.
It's incredible
that it
Have
went
you read
on
the Wired
so.
Story yet?
What's that?
Have you read the Wired story?
No, I have not. I watched some YouTube videos on it that were covering it, but I
will. Read the Wired. You need to read the Wired story.
Okay. But yeah, he's so young too. That's the other part.
Because he's our age.
He wrote this algorithm to, when he was in his late teens, is what it sounds like. I mean, very fascinating. More to come with that. I wanted to get your quick take on, what captured your attention with that.
And he has history here too.
Really?
In Dallas?
Yeah. Oh yeah. He lived for a while around our Fairburg.
Oh, right.
So again,
very nice.
More to come.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Little short teaser.
So we want to wrap up. We wrap up all of our interviews with a segment called Controlled Rowdiness. So in such a segment, we're going to ask you some rapid fire questions, and you just come up with the thing that comes to the top of your head, the best first answer you can come up with. And the first, as I'll get the segment started, is how many elevators are currently working at your abode right now?
There are 3 elevators in the building, and all of them are functioning. Right
Hey, wow.
Yeah, it's a good day around here.
Well, that's good news. We've been keeping up with your Facebook posts, and that hasn't been the case very often, it doesn't seem like.
Favorite and least favorite guest that you've had?
Favorite and least favorite guest on the podcast or on the show?
Your choice. Probably a show because it's been around longer, but whatever you'd like.
Gosh, I always loved Darren Woodson when we had him on, for sure. He was always great to talk football with. He would be a favorite. I always liked Rusty Greer. We did a weekly show with him for many years. He was always a great guest. I don't know. I always liked guys who could break the sport down to the next level, who could get a level higher and tell me something I didn't know. We had a lot of those over here. As far as least favorite, I don't know. I never liked just any that we couldn't get anything out of, any that we couldn't connect with. Sometimes guys would come in drunk or loaded or something. I didn't like that too much.
Yeah.
But sometimes guys would show up for the interview and it'd be obvious that they didn't want to do it.
There's one interview in particular that I remember you ended and said, you seem like you're just about as interested in this as we are, and then just cut that was Kenny Lofton?
That was Kenny Lofton, yeah. When he was with the Rangers. We interviewed him out in spring training, and he was not into it.
So that was it.
I'd been told that. I'd been told that, look, you're not going to like him too much. Not a real good interview.
Yeah. So that was in person?
Do what?
That was in person?
No, he was on the phone with us. It was in spring training, but he was at the hotel or wherever those guys are, the place where he stayed, and we were there at the ballpark still.
And you had to say, okay, that's it.
Yeah, just be done.
Was it my impression of a Norm drop?
So,
terrible impression.
What piece of band equipment have you sold or traded that you wish you had back?
Yeah. I hate this question because I've got too many.
Piece of band equipment that I've sold or traded that I wish I had back.
Yeah, guitars, a drum set.
Yeah, I know what it is. I used to have a cherry red Les Paul Standard.
That sounds just like my story.
Yeah. That I wish I had back. I traded it for a Strat. I wish I had.
Oh, not a maybe a Telecaster.
Wow.
No, Strat. It was a Strat.
Yeah.
When was this?
This was probably 6-7 years ago.
How old was that? Was it a newer Les Paul Standard or was it an older one?
It was a newer one. It wasn't.
Yeah, still fantastic guitars.
Yeah, great. It was a great guitar.
Yeah, I've got several too that are painful when I think about it. Who would win in a foot race, George Dunham or Caitlyn Jenner?
I'll give that to the big man.
All right.
Okay.
Caitlyn would probably be wanting to run in high heels.
Yes.
I'm
sure.
This is true.
The heels don't come off.
Which ticket drop did you hate the most when you were on the air?
Michael? I was by that at first, but it drove me crazy after a while.
Once and for all, who killed JFK?
We don't know.
We don't know.
We know who didn't, or I know who didn't.
Once and for all, who did not kill JFK?
I don't think it was Lee Harvey.
Yeah.
Or if it was, he was part of a conspiracy.
So Gordon got to you, huh?
No, he didn't get to me. We were at complete opposites on this.
Yeah.
He thinks Lee Harvey acted alone.
Yeah. He thinks it for sure happened. Yeah.
He thinks that Lee Harvey acted alone. I don't think he did.
Yeah.
Best and worst Rangers of all time.
Best and worst Rangers of all time. Oh, let's see. God, there have been a lot of really, really bad ones. Back in the early days, they used to have a guy who was kind of their big home run hitter on the 72 Rangers, which were a terrible, terrible team, named Ted Ford.
Mm-hmm.
I believe he was the leading home run hitter that they had that year with something like 14 or 12 or somewhere like that.
Oh, wow.
But he was completely useless in any other way.
Oof. See, I thought for sure it was going to be A-Rod or Josh Hamilton. But
No.
A-Rod came to my mind just because how much I disliked him.
Mm-hmm.
Not that he's a bad baseball player.
I disliked A-Rod too, but A-Rod's a really good baseball player.
Yeah.
So best all-time Ranger, who is it?
Can we delineate between when he was into it and when he wasn't?
Yes.
Okay. When he was into it, there was nothing like Josh Hamilton.
Yep.
We talked about this earlier today too.
Yeah.
There was nothing.
Yeah, he was
like
a monster.
You have not seen a baseball player like that. And the closer you observed him from, and as far as physical space goes, the more you saw that. I mean, the more you could feel the power of his swing, the way he ran, his presence, his size.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there was nothing like that guy.
His tattoos.
Yeah, his tattoos,
The
edge.
Yeah.
Is it?
But-
oh, God.
But when he was not into it, there was nobody more useless.
Is it fair to say that Joshua Sherlock's was great? Post Sherlock's problematic.
I don't know. I don't look at Sherlock's as a dividing line because he was not into it before then.
Yeah. Do you think it was the second World Series loss?
In the 2011 World Series, he was not into it at all. In the 2011 World Series, it seemed to me like all he wanted to do was get the at-bat over with.
Yeah.
And it was that way for much of that season, too. But when he was into it, like he was in 2010, 2009, some of the years leading up to that, man, we have not seen the likes of that. And I don't know when we will again.
Very fair. That was my thought, too, is he was a monster when he was up. What will happen first? The Cowboys winning another Super Bowl or Trump winning another presidency?
I hope.
That's a great way to start.
I hope it's the Cowboys winning another Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Because we can't stand 4 more years of that.
All right. Last question. Can you finish this statement? November 22nd, 1963 was the day that JFK.
It was finally the day that Kennedy got it through his head that we didn't like him in Dallas.
Okay, one last PS
okay.
Is that
question.
what you wanted?
Yeah, that's exactly what I wanted.
We both remembered hearing that live.
Because that is anytime we're down in the Dallas area, that is the one thing that my mom and my wife hate is we'll cross over that X on Elm Street. And I'm like, you know where we are right now? We're at the exact spot that can, and the radio will get turned up. I'll get shouted down, threatened to get pushed out of the car.
Ew.
Yep.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. Okay, last question. Unless he's got one more last one.
No.
Are you ready to confirm the rumors
Oh yeah.
that you and Grego are working on a project?
No, I'm not ready to confirm it.
Okay. All right.
We were so
there you go.
close. So close.
Well, hey, Mike, if you'll let our listeners know where they can find your Dark Companion, where they can look at Petty Theft, where can we find your stuff, where can they follow you?
You can follow me on Twitter. I'm the old gray wolf. I'm too active on there for the liking of some people these days.
Jake will get over it.
What?
I said Jake will get over it. Your Twitter fights with Jake have been the highlight of the Maverick season.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I love Jake.
Mm-hmm.
I love Jake, but I just can't believe that he doesn't see this for what it is. But he'll learn. He's a young guy. He'll learn. I was like that once too. On Facebook, I'm Mike Rhyner. Let's see, petty theft. Go to pettytheftdallas.com. You can always find where we are, but follow me on Facebook and Twitter. I put all of our impending gigs up on there, usually a week in advance, sometimes more. And your dark companion can be found at vokalnow.com. That's VOKAL now.com.
Right on. Well,
and Vokal is a place that houses podcasts. There's all kinds of other good things on there that you'll like. I hope you'll listen to mine. I also hope you'll listen to the Mom Game with Emily Jones and Julie Dobbs. And
I have seen that.
There's just all kinds of other good stuff up there on Vokal. Vokal exists for podcasts. That's what they do. It's one of the things that drew me to it.
Well, Mike, we can't thank you enough for being on the show today, brother. Thank you so much.
Thank you, boys, for having me. I appreciate it.
Mike freaking Rhyner.
Oh, my God.
What the heck are we doing?
Okay, so we did our anniversary episode, and we talked about all of the crazy guests that we had on, right, and how, like, you know, Nancy Pearcey and Stephen Mansfield were intellectually intimidating and all this. I felt like a little child.
I did too. I was going to say,
time.
I wasn't intimidated as much. I was giddy.
It was so hard because his candor and the way he talks is so deliberate that there are spaces in between. And I think having listened to him for so long on the radio, like, we knew that there was more coming. But I don't know if you were having the same issue that I was. I was so excited. I wanted to. He would start to say something, and I was like, "Okay, I have five questions.
There was 9 more
I have 5 questions about that. Can you talk to me a little more about this?"
One that I didn't get to ask that I thought of was, when did you find your radio voice? Like, because he was talking about how much he hated math in school. I wonder if he went up to his teacher and he was like, "Listen, Miss Thompson, I'm not going to have my homework completed entirely in time like we discussed."
Yeah.
Or was that just something in college, or he started working on it? But he's got the best voice in the game.
It's so good.
When did that kick in?
I don't know.
I should have asked him. I did ask him where Shoopy came from, which is something that I kicked myself so many times after we talked to Groobs, and after we talked to Groobs the second time, I still didn't ask him, where'd you get this nickname? Because I thought it was going to be public knowledge, and I asked you, and you're like, I don't know.
Maybe we should have...
We didn't ask the most important question.
We might need to have Groobs on just for 5 minutes to answer that question and that question only.
Yeah.
And then just...
Mike calls you Shoopy, and you call him Shoopy. Where did that come from?
Yeah,
Mike's not sure.
Yeah. He has no idea.
He knows it happened at some point, and that's it.
Yeah,
and I'm okay with that answer if it's just, something just, happened naturally, which is what it sounds like it was. But I am curious if there's any more information to that. So how many years have we listened to that? I'm sorry to keep harping on this.
No. I mean, at least Groobs was with the ticket for close to a decade.
Yeah.
Right. And so most of that time,
it was because if it
happened, and if it happened with Expo,
sound Shoopy.
Hey, Shoopy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I loved getting into the ticket stuff at first, but we both, even though we had so many questions that were about that,
we had more.
And he was so gracious to answer those. It is one of those things that Mike is a person that is consistently looking at what he's doing now and what he's going to do next, right? Like, what's the next hill he's going to climb? What's the next mountain that he's going to conquer? And I thought that time that he gave us talking about the past was very, very cool. But I really saw him light up when we talked about your dark companion with what he's doing now in the interviews that he's getting to do now.
It's the same thing with us. Like, we both like working on new things, and I hate to say it, but if something, I get bored quickly. So I do understand.
Stunned.
I don't want to talk about something I did years ago, or I will for a little bit. And I'm not trying to compare myself to his accomplishments.
Probably good.
Night and day. But I do understand, and I agree, he was very gracious answering some, frankly, fanboy questions. But
no doubt.
We would have been remiss to not talk about the ticket with him.
Right.
Legendary radio station, legendary talent on that. I don't know if you could state the impact that little station has had, that the chicken has had.
Yeah, no, and we did get the anus from him, which I thought was spectacular.
Both of us smirked, knowing that was an inside joke about the ticket.
Hard to keep it together a couple of times during that, but I really liked in the interview when he was talking about how your dark companion gives him the freedom to do the interviews that he wants to do. Because he's getting to talk to people for however long the conversation goes.
He kind of described what we're doing.
He did.
Yeah.
And there is a lot of freedom into it. The difference between what we're doing and what he's doing is he can get whoever he wants on the show.
And he knows these people. Like Troy
Right.
Aikman, he knows him. He's worked with him for a very long time.
Yeah.
They have an established relationship, so he gets to go deeper in some areas where we are meeting people and trying to establish the foundation, and then we go in deeper a little bit. But
Yeah.
I agree. I think, man, it's so cool what
And
he's doing.
that is one of the challenges that we have with interviewing, right? Not to peel back the curtain too much, but it is, you've got about 5 minutes of prep. We have a couple of questions that we ask in the very beginning. Is there anything you don't want us to talk about? What things do you want us to promote? And then we've got an hour. So it's dive into the interview and make like we're old friends and know one another and are asking questions. But with the people that he's talking to, with Emily Jones, with Robert Wolonsky, with Brad Sham, with Troy Aikman, these are people that he has a history with. And there's a lot of information out there about them and the things that they're doing. And he gets some spectacular content that's unlike anybody else I've ever heard with those specific people.
I'm going to be
so
I'm going to
cool.
be listening to all of his episodes because he's a master interviewer, and he's doing we're doing a similar format.
Right.
So
He's just doing it markedly better than we are.
and he said he rips off whatever he finds out in the world that he thinks he can use. I'm gonna do the same thing because
We
I'm just gonna
have been doing the same
actually
thing.
I was gonna say we learned everything that we know from the ticket.
Yeah,
Frankly, growing up listening to it.
And there's so many, if you were to listen to some of the other podcasts that we listen to, you'll notice that some of our guests cross over because they're interested in the same people that we're interested in. Now, they've got some guests that are unique to them and vice versa, but it's because, those shared interests. And so we're realizing that there are certain points we use other podcasts for research and are asking similar questions and all of those kind
and
of
other
things.
podcasts rip off stuff from us too.
They do. Looking at you, Jesse's. So one of...
They're going to be like, what? What did we rip off?
They just used the word spoils one time. One of the things about Mike that I've always appreciated is the sort of like affable quality he has about his accomplishments.
Yeah, he's very humble.
He is
I'm not sure what I did or if I did anything, but
right. And
if
it's-
others were to say that I did, then I would accept it.
I think
How's
that's
that?
one of those things. It's pretty good, pretty solid. That's one of those things I've always appreciated. Is it doesn't come across as false humility, that it's very genuine. That he was very matter of fact. I'm not the person that gets to say what kind of impact we have or haven't had.
I thought that was very
But this
wise,
is
too.
what the journey
Yeah.
has been like for me. And while certainly he's not, that other people will be the ones, us, being one of those groups.
He has impacted both of us. So.
Yeah, and the ticket format as it is right now, sports radio in Dallas in general, and the
I grew up
DFW
listening
market.
to Gordon. He made me want to be funny, or work on that skill. Same with Corby. I mean, there's a ton. Every single person on there has had funny moments.
But
Gordon
each one
and
of those
Corby are
guys
definitely
owes
the
that
funniest.
to Mike.
Yeah.
And he was talking about how it wasn't, he wasn't able to get big talent, that they needed big talent, they needed a big signal, and all of those things, and he wasn't able to get them. No talent, no signal, didn't have one of the major sports teams, so it wasn't going to work. And yet, with what he created, with the guys he put together, with the camaraderie that he built, those people behind his leadership were able to become those guys who are now big name talent.
Yeah.
There's not one person that you can take out of that lineup and say, oh, well, this isn't, a big key player, not just in DFW, but in the sports market in general. Likewise, if you look at the other stations in the DFW market that are doing sports radio. So many of them started off as the ticket, and that's how they launched their careers, was being guys that were there. If you look at the broadcasting teams for most of the DFW teams, you look at the Mavericks, you look at the Rangers, some stuff with the Cowboys, not as much there, but with the Stars as well. So many of those guys got their start at the ticket. That's where they cut their teeth and learned how to apply their craft. And that's such an incredible thing. You know, that guy's got an amazing lineage of, you know, just radio excellence and broadcasting excellence as it's trickled down. It's so incredible to see, just again, you know, like you said, just how humble he is about accepting credit for that. He's still just focused on what he is. And I do love that he told the story about, I just went in and fell on the sword.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sorry. I'll go talk to him. Yeah. And then there was never a conversation about it.
It felt like, dad getting called in to talk to the principal. And it's like, he did what? Like, he punched a kid. What happened? Well, the other kid started it, and he was calling names. And also, you hit a girl. It's like, okay, I'm going to go take this kid for ice cream now.
Yeah.
You know, Groobs had a legendary moment. I don't know how I would have reacted running, because I would have seen the negative impact that we've now had on the ticket's ability to be able to go to spring training.
Right, yeah.
That's not something you just breeze past.
Right.
But, man, what a story. What a legendary story of getting the ticket, the hard line, banned from spring training. Amazing.
Yeah, and then having the guy, the Godfather of the ticket, go in and be like, you know what?
I'm sorry.
I'm gonna go to bat for you. Yeah. I'm gonna go talk. You're gonna be fine. And he did. He did exactly that. You know, he went in, he fell on the sword, and that he's the one guy.
I have wondered that.
Yeah, he's the one guy that they couldn't lose.
Yeah.
Right. And then allowing the other guys on the show the freedom to experiment and kind of become who they are. Right. You see a lot of guys that are.
That's what all I'm wanting from you with this TikTok thing. Just let me be who I'm gonna be. Let me blossom.
We'll get to that later. But with that in particular, I mean, there's a lot of guys that are like the primary talent on a show, or that are the name of a certain show, and so everything falls to them, right? And so they want to make sure that they're front and center the whole time, that the show is about them. And one of the things that was so great about Mike is the way that he let everybody's personality breathe. Right, he let, Gordon started out on his show, and so he kind of let him become Gordo before the morning show took him. The same thing with the board ops. They don't play a role on most other shows, and yet he's allowed that because and part of it is just by not squashing it and wanting to, what would it be? Wanting to cultivate creativity within the team. He's had guys like Expo and Psycho Dave and Mino and Groobs and on and on and on. All these guys who have been able to create their own personality to become part of the show, even though they talk for 30 seconds a week, then the craft that they have with just the
how
the
much
officers
more engaged,
of the drops,
Yeah, how much more engaged are they if they do get these small opportunities?
Right.
Yeah, it's worked out.
Yeah.
And we almost got him to spill the beans on if he's working with Grego or not.
We did, and so they were
so close.
There were two really interesting looks that we got. One, when we mentioned the Cowboys and having the Cowboys on the station, and if they weren't allowed to do things, and we had a moment where he gave us a look, and then the camera froze. So maybe Jerry Jones was listening in on our conversation, because that was the only time we had any real technical issues. And the second was talking about Grego and the controlled rowdiness segment. I would be so in for that.
Do you think something's going on? There's a project.
I hope something's going on.
Yeah.
I'll put it that way. I hope there is, because I will say this. Greg has had a career even outside of the ticket. And one of the things that has always harmed him is the people that he's had shows with. Because the people that he's worked with in all of these other settings have not done what Mike, we've already stated, is so good at. Just let the guy be who he is. Don't correct him every time. He's going to say things that are crazy. He's going to say things that are obscene. But if
when
you
I play a TikTok, just
if
go
you-
with it.
If you, I don't understand why you're so focused on. We have a whole other show outside of these stupid TikToks. But I've just rolled with every one of them.
Yeah,
you just
you have
haven't.
to.
Yeah, you just haven't found any that are that funny. But the whole thing with
Challenge
it
accepted.
is he allowed Grego to be Grego.
Yeah.
He allowed him to, be abrasive when he wanted to be abrasive, but also for his sports knowledge and sort of just because the guy is very tenderhearted, and he allowed all of those things this space to breathe without ever treating Grego in a way where he was demeaning to him. And so many of the other hosts I've heard with Grego have done that they've tried to write him off in one way, shape, form, or fashion, and are using his name in order to build their own careers. And it's just been really unfortunate.
Yeah, that's odd.
It is. And it sucks for the listening audience. Because what turned me off to so many of the other shows that Grego was on was not Greg, because Greg was still great. It was these other guys that were with him that you could tell were trying to use him in order to make their own careers. And it was a bummer. And if they were able to get together, I think that is probably the strongest show in DFW history. It was by far the most entertaining with the group that they had there. And in its heyday, I would put it up against absolutely anything. There is one interview in particular that I do not know. I have never been able to find the audio of, and that is Grego and Mike interviewing Quincy Carter when he called them to talk about marijuana, and then because he was kicked off the team, presumably it was about marijuana, so he calls them to talk about marijuana because they're talking about him, and then determines in the interview that he does not want to talk about marijuana. I want to pick Rhyner's brain about that interview. What were those 15, 20 minutes like as you were fighting with this guy who called in, right? He found the guest hotline number, he called in on the air, and they had a scrap. But there's so many other moments like that. I'm excited to get him in.
We had to kill the ticket talk.
I know.
Just because we could have gone 4 hours.
Right.
Pretty easily.
And we're going to have him in studio. He did confirm whenever we get to interview Lynn Ulbricht, who is the mother of Ross Ulbricht, the Dread Pirate Roberts, the man who invented the Silk Road.
Good.
And we'll have Mike Rhyner in person to help us with potentially one of the coolest interviews we get to do, and get to see how it is that he prepares, and how does one of the best radio personalities.
Teach us what you know, Mike.
Yeah, that's it. We're
moldable. We're young-ish.
We don't have bad opinions about the Mavericks.
Yeah.
Like other people our age.
I actually have no opinions about the Mavericks. I don't care.
Well, thank you guys
do more,
for watching another episode of the Reverend and the Reprobate. Thanks, Mike Rhyner, for coming on. Make sure that you check out Petty Theft, Your Dark Companion.
PettyTheftDallas.com.
Yep, and then go follow Mike on Twitter. He's a great follow, especially if you're watching the Rangers or the Mavs game. He live tweets a lot of those. Has some incredible
so does
opinions.
Groups, man. He's so funny.
So funny. Go check them out because they do a lot of call and response to one another.
Yeah.
Thank you all for watching another episode of the Reverend and the Reprobate as we start year 2.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
Hi, this is Mike Rhyner. I have a podcast. It's called Your Dark Companion. Find it on vokalnow.com. But I'll tell you what, you should never, ever listen to the Reverend and the Reprobate. Don't. You're wasting your time. You got better things to do. It's a big world out there. Go out in it.